Time now for The Clash. Immigration has long been the priority concern for loyal Tories, but Liz Truss's stance on the matter sparked an apparent row inside government over the weekend. The PM is alleged to be making a U-turn on immigration rules in a bid to boost the economy, including allowing more foreign workers to Britain by reforming current visa rules. In the coming weeks, she intends to raise the cap on seasonal agricultural workers and make changes to the shortage occupations list, which will allow key sectors to recruit more overseas staff. However, Cabinet Brexiteers, including Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch, are said to have voiced fierce resistance to the idea, demanding immigration must fall as the country pushes for growth. Meanwhile, Jacob Rees-Mogg told colleagues he would support the PM, but only if the plans were shown to improve GDP per capita. Critics say the terrifying sectarian violence between Muslims and Hindus in Leicester and the Midlands since late August is proof that the UK immigration population must be reduced. Over the weekend, Asian women from those areas said they were living in fear after the widespread religious disorder had, quote, torn their community apart. Police have made nearly 50 arrests in relation to the violence, while one man has been jailed for possessing an offensive weapon. But what do you think? Does the Leicester violence show immigration to the UK must be cut? Let me know your thoughts by emailing Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews, and while you're there, go and vote in our poll. Those results shortly. But to help you make up your mind, debating this tonight, the daughter of Indian immigrants, the broadcaster Narinder Kaur, YouTuber and son of an Iranian political refugee Maya Tusi, and journalist and former UKIP politician Suzanne Evans. So, Suzanne, this feels like quite a major row in the Truss government, because Truss is doing everything to push for economic growth. But of course, you've got folk like Braverman saying, hang on a moment, this mass immigration, it ain't working. Oh, Maya Tusi, we're just going to sort out Suzanne Evans' sound. So do you want to come in, Maya?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the economic migration policy that Liz Truss has come up with, it's weird timing because she has not won the argument, because these are two different topics, technically speaking, but they are kind of linked. Right now, there is a topic about need for economic migration for certain areas, but considering there are bigger topics when it comes to illegal migration, when it comes to lack of integration in certain areas, she needs to actually come out, say two things before announcing a policy like this. She needs to prioritize in areas that we can, prioritize our people, educate and train our people to become the workers in those areas, and certain sectors that we can't, short term, medium term, then we can actually say, to clarify, these are the visas that we're going to give out to certain people. We're going to vet them. These are the numbers that we need, and we're going to bring them in just for this sector. That's fine. But right now it's mixed with all this stuff that's going on in Leicester, but of course the Dover situation, and it's just not really going too well, this whole debate. Everything's completely kicked off, and some people on the left keep saying, well, it's just a tiny minority is going on. We're not talking about bringing on migration because of a tiny minority in Leicester doing that. That's just a sign that the whole situation in the country is not going well. Until a few years ago, we were saying that, well, bring down the pace and rate of first-generation migration so that second-generation and third-generation could actually integrate. Now we are seeing clashes from the second-generation kids and sometimes third-generation. They're not even integrating, and that's the problem.
Suzanne Evans, I think we've got you back now.
Sorry about that, Dan. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think uncontrolled immigration has been a massive problem. And the peak of this now that we've seen in this terrible ghettoized violence is appalling. But I wanted to express a slight note of caution, I think. Suella Braverman is going to be delivering a fresh immigration policy in the next few weeks. So I think we ought really to wait and see what happens then. There's always lots of speculation going on around immigration and potential government policy. I think very often, too, Downing Street's been known in the past just to float an idea out there to see how it's received by the public. So I personally would prefer to wait to see what Suella Braverman has got to say about immigration when she actually delivers that policy. But let's be honest about this. Immigration is always one of the top three issues for voters in this country, particularly for Conservative voters. I think Liz Truss so far is doing a very good job. We had Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget on Friday, which has some very solid, old-fashioned, if you like, Conservative policies. I think that's won a lot of kudos among Conservative voters. If there's any hint that immigration is going to be allowed to get worse, and that's how it will be seen, however they want to spin it. If the numbers are going to go up, then I'm afraid the Conservative Party membership is not going to like that. And the Parliamentary Party is going to be on a very sticky wicket come the next election.
Narinder Kaur, you are obviously, well, you lived in Leicester for, I think, 15 years. Surely you look at what's happening in your city and think, hang on a moment, this uncontrolled immigration is not working.
No, I think the total opposite. As an Asian woman that's lived in Leicester for 15 years, this violence that happened a few weeks ago is not representative at all of what's going on in Leicester, of how multiculturalism does work, and we do live in harmony and we do live nicely together. There's so many points here, I don't even know where to start. The fact is, with the other two panelists, with Maya and Susanna, we have a labour shortage. How do you propose we will fulfil these jobs? We're short of 40,000 nurses, 100,000 social care workers, and 100,000 drivers. How do you propose we will fulfil these jobs? Because people in this country aren't taking these jobs.
Well, Maya, you had a plan for that, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, okay, this is the problem. We kept putting a plaster on it for years and years. Since the 90s, we kept doing this mistake. We didn't really deal with it. So we said, okay, we need more, nurses, doctors, or whatever you want. And we say, okay, instead of actually trying to sort out the problem long term, let's get economic migrants. And I have no problem with that. It's a good plaster. And every country does it. But we kept doing that, but we didn't do anything long term. I mean, of course, I agree that even for now, short term, certain sectors get the economic migrants, but
that's just brown exploitation. You're exploiting brown people for a short-term solution. And you're saying it's a plaster. My father came over to this country in the 1960s to work in the steel foundries, and we integrated into society perfectly.
Okay.
I couldn't even speak English until I was 6 years old.
To respond to that point, so Narinder says it's brown exploitation, Maya.
Yes, it is.
Who mentioned brown? Nobody's talking about brown people. They could be, Polish doctors. They could be Canadian engineers. No one's talking about brown.
Paying more, and then you'll say that wages aren't. Oh, they're not fulfilling their wages. Then you have that argument. But we're talking about jobs, the social care work jobs. We're talking about the drivers. We're talking about the fruit pickers. That is brown people exploitation.
Suzanne
and you're
Evans.
Worried about integration into society.
Let's just let Suzanne Evans come in here. Suzanne?
So I think it's interesting. We just heard, didn't we, about fathers coming over here as immigrants in the 1960s. And that's
my
the
father,
issue,
yes.
isn't it, really? Yeah, it was a very different world in the 1960s. When immigrants came to this country in the 1960s, they integrated because they had to. It was really only in the mid-90s, with the advent of Tony Blair's government, that he pushed this philosophy of multiculturalism. And that was a very, very specific philosophy that said you can come to this country, you don't have to integrate, you can behave exactly the same way as you would have behaved in your home country. And that
but they don't do that, Dana. That
immigration,
is silly.
when migrants come to this country and they work and they integrate and they respect British values,
Suzanne, let
that's a
Narinder
very
respond.
different thing. And that's what happened in the 1960s. It doesn't happen so much now, unfortunately.
Suzanne, back in the 1960s, they used to say my parents weren't integrating, and they did integrate. They used to say back then, my uncles and aunts, they're not integrating. They're still wearing the Indian clothes.
Okay, Maya's shaking his head.
They said
Maya,
the same back then.
why are you shaking your head, Maya?
Okay, 60s, post-50s, 60s, 70s, you had one tiny difference. A lot of those waves were Commonwealth citizens. And there's a difference. A lot of, as Suzanne said, in terms of because the rate was smaller, integration was easier, but also culture-wise, there were a lot of similarities. Whereas if you come from other certain countries...
There wasn't similarities. My parents came over from India. They didn't have a clue about this country. They couldn't even speak the language.
It doesn't matter. I mean,
they integrated. It's got nothing to do with Commonwealth. It's about they came and fulfilled the jobs that British people wouldn't fulfill.
Narinder, can I just ask a question, Narinder? Narinder, can I just ask a question? Narinder, hold up 1 second. Hold up 1 second, Narinder. Do you genuinely believe, because look at what's been going on in Leicester, and we've seen all the videos, do you genuinely believe that those immigrants are integrating in the same way that your parents did in the 1960s? Because I'm afraid to say, Narinder, the evidence is stacked completely against that.
Dan, I don't think the evidence is stacked. It's a very small minority. It is not representative of what's going on in this city. I've lived here for 15 years. Nothing like that's going on. It's just a little bit of a loud group, and that's all it is. And guess what? As Hindus and Muslims and a Sikh that I am, we're not immune to having a few problems. British people have problems. You have your British football hooliganisms. You have problems. We're not immune to having a few little problems. It's not representative, and it doesn't mean we don't integrate, and it doesn't mean that we don't come here and work hard. Immigration must not be curbed. We need the economy to be stimulated, and we need the workers, and British people are not fulfilling those jobs. It's as simple as that.
OK, Suzanne?
I think actually this talk about the economy being stimulated by immigration is a little bit of a red herring, really. One of the problems that we've had over the past few decades is that British productivity has been incredibly low because industries haven't invested in automation. They haven't involved in new methods of working because it's been much easier to get cheap labour to do basically cheap jobs. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. We have 1.2 million unemployed people in this country, and we need to invest in them. And I was quite pleased last week to see that the government is trying to encourage people who work part-time, who are on low-paid work, to get more and better work. And I think that's a start. But we've had decades of short-term policies that have filled job vacancies through cheap labour instead of actually investing properly in jobs and
then you have to raise wages and you have to raise all kinds of things and money.
Thank you to you all. Fascinating debate, very heated. The former UKIP leader Suzanne Evans, the broadcaster Narinder Kaur, and the YouTuber Maya Tusi. Much appreciated. So who do you agree with? Does the Leicester violence show immigration to the UK must be cut? Well, Keith on Twitter writes, cheap foreign labour keeps us in the dark ages. It prevents technology taking over and upskilling or training our own people, not to mention it keeps wages low as it continually floods the labour market with more people. Immigration should be curbed. From Clanger on Twitter, allowing employers to bring skilled workers into this country to meet demands we can't cope with internally in the NHS, healthcare and other sectors has nothing to do with sectarian violence in Leicester. And from Julian on email, I'm a former Labour voter. We need to leave the ECHR and introduce a points-based immigration system. Otherwise, we are just a country with an illusion of democracy. And your verdict is now, and this one is overwhelming. 88% of you agree the Leicester violence does show UK immigration should be cut. Just 12% of you say it doesn't.